Hello, dear friends, I'm with you. Finally, we have waited for the next update of the Ice and Flame mod. This time, the developers decided to please us with some pretty serious changes in fashion, although we still won't see any new creatures. As the developer himself comments on this, it is better to release the game with a delay, but of good quality, than to hurry up and give the world another unplayable poop. We do not need such good, so we will be content with fixes for now, especially since they are worthy of separate consideration. Well, at the end of the video, let's remember what kind of creatures we were promised to give out in the future. The first thing that catches your eye is the altered flight of creatures, especially dragons. It has become much more convenient. Dragons are now more maneuverable, improved takeoff and landing. Dragons are no longer stupid when landing, but dive very nicely, stretch their paws, and sit down just before landing. I was also very pleased with the automatic switching of the camera to a third-person view as soon as you sit on the dragon. In addition, the camera now captures the dragon almost completely, regardless of the size of the mount. If you remember, in the old version, the dragon did not fit on the screen, especially for high-level dragons. As for the flight of other creatures, I didn't like the changes in the flight of hippogriffs at all. They completely lost their inertia, which is why the feeling of flying on a living being was lost. Now it's somewhat like flying in creative mode. Well, in general, the mechanics of flights have improved in the sense that the mounts have become more manageable. Previously, there was a feeling that the animal under the player has its own will. You direct it somewhere, and it does everything with a delay, as if it resists. Now the tamed creatures are absolutely submissive and very easy to control. The developers in general fixed various problems with flying mounts, such as disappearance, teleportation, death, duplication, and the like. I have personally encountered disappearance and teleportation more than once. This phenomenon is very unpleasant. Some of you may remember similar moments during my streams when I was building a dragon rider's location. In the new version, the dragons under the riders are able to break blocks very cheerfully. Perhaps some of you will be horrified looking at this site in anticipation of a complete mess on the server. Riding on dragons, I demolished sand and even stone mountains. I tried cobblestone walls, brick walls, and various other things. Blocks of ores, metals, and obsidian did not break. But don't be scared. Not everything is so scary. In fact, only 10% of the destroyed blocks fall out with objects. So it won't work out much to farm, unless you use a dragon as a bulldozer, and even then it's not the most accurate. In addition, the developer gives us the opportunity to blacklist blocks in configurations that you do not want the dragons to break, so the chaos is cancelled. The developers claim that dragons and myrmics will no longer suffer from topographic cretinism and, in theory, should better navigate the terrain. In addition, both of them will no longer be constantly spinning in place like a top, as it often happened with them in the old versions. A sleep-related configuration has been added for dragons, and a health-related configuration for basilisks. We are also promised that this version of the mod will behave better on servers, but I can only comment on this to you after I update it on my server. Dragons have been added an inventory slot in which you can put a flag. The idea was clearly borrowed from the creator of the fashion Jagang Mount 2, although they implemented it somewhat differently. In Ossifar of Dragons, the banner is displayed not with a ball trap sticking out from under the saddle, but stands vertically behind the rider's back, almost like the back of a chair. In the new version, dragons can no longer turn bedrock into charred stone. The fact that there was such an opportunity before, I personally found out when I read the list of fixes in the update. It turns out that there really was. The dragon, pouring fire on the thigh, turned it into a charred stone, which, recovering, gradually became an ordinary stone. Well, there is no problem cutting down the whole thing. In this way, it was possible to make holes into the abyss. But now it won't work anymore. The world order has been decided. Bedrock is not being destroyed again. More of the nice updates. Dragons after hatching retain the name assigned to the egg using a tag. Previously, this mechanics did not work, but now we can give names to the dragons that have not yet hatched. Apparently, this means that more dragons with names that suit both boys and girls will fly in cubic worlds. Fixed some buggies with fictors. Now they can eat cocoa beans when they are on the ground, and the cubs will no longer be able to ride. Imagine, in the old versions this was possible. I even checked this case just in case. Well, it seems that the amphibian cubs no longer attack players, plus other minor fixes. Some changes have also affected sea serpents, which in Russian translation were called leviathans. They no longer worship in boats, and in general somehow they should worship less. Although, of course, it was fun to hang humpbacks over the boats. Apparently, this was because they accidentally got into the boat like other mobs. Now it has been repaired, and from now on sea snakes are able to break and sink boats, which, by the way, looks very epic. Also, the rendering distance has increased for sea kites. Here, check it out. That's the distance they disappeared from view in the old version. And here's how long we can observe them in the new one. As you can see, the distance has approximately doubled. Probably, this was done so that, floating on the sea, we could notice them much earlier, and we would have a better chance of survival. Earplugs now protect us not only from the singing of sirens, but also from the dragon's roar. The silver armor has changed its model and texture, and, in my opinion, it has become really better. The helmet has a visor raised, and there is a plumage. The armor itself looks more detailed, even the shoulder pads are visible. However, the color of the tunic does not seem very beautiful to me. They could have chosen a better color scheme for the silver armor, but nevertheless, the new armor is undoubtedly better than those that were before, a change that pleased me personally. Pedestals now display not only dragon eggs, but any objects in general. In general, I have wanted this for a very long time. Of course, not all objects look as beautiful in pedestals as eggs, but still this is already a step in the right direction. Another nice change is that the content of the bestiary in the inventory no longer occupies the entire screen. To see which of the entries you have in the notebook, now you need to press Shift. And perhaps it's worth mentioning that the developers have updated translations into some languages, in particular into Russian. In addition to all that I have listed, there were a whole bunch of points concerning various fixes. But most viewers are unlikely to be interested in such small details, so there is no point in mentioning them. Moreover, fixes are coming out anyway with each update. And of course, when new fixes are released, there are always new bugs, much less without them. While I was testing the update, I already found one right away. During the flight of the dragons, the texture of the armor disappears, then appears, and I did not observe this in the old version. And what buggies did you find on the new version, my dear viewers? And which of the mod updates did you really appreciate? Write your thoughts in the comments below this video, and I continue. And now, I propose to speculate on the topic of the upcoming big update, and the creatures that we are promised to add. So, off we go. First of all, I want to bring you up to date on the so-called phases 1 and 2, around which there are so many legends. For those who do not know what these phases are, I will explain. The developers have divided the addition of creatures into 2 stages, which in English sounds like 2 phases. The development of the mod began on the version of Minecraft 1.12.2, which at that time was the most relevant of the new versions. Now it is slowly becoming obsolete, although it still does not lose relevance. However, the developers are clearly very far-sighted people and understand that it is necessary to move with the times. The 14th version of Minecraft is gaining momentum. There are more and more good mods for it. Therefore, the creators of Ice and Flame divided the development of their mod into 2 phases. The first phase is the addition of creatures to the Minecraft version of the mod 1.12.2, and the second phase is the transfer of the mod and the addition of creatures to the Minecraft version 1.14.4. In the first phase, we got dragons, fire and ice, hippogriffs, hippocampus, pixies, snowmen, amphiptera gorgons, cyclops, sirens, death worms, trolls, stymphalian birds, basilisks, myrmics, and sea snakes. The last thing we are promised in this phase is the boss Queen of Terror and her army. And now attention, information from the developer's website. After the addition of the Queen of Horror, Phase 1 ends, and the developers do not plan to continue working with the Ice and Flame mod for the 12th version of Minecraft. That is, the maximum that we will see from the updates to the 12th version will be fixes. After that, the transition to the second phase begins. That is, work with the mod will be carried out on version 1.14.4, and all the declared creatures will be added to the 14th version, namely Storm Dragon, aka Lightning Dragon, Hydra, Wendigo, vampires, werewolves, automatons, ghosts, goblins, kraken, and boss under the name and Fritz, or the Fire Boss. By the way, in addition to the Storm Dragon, I have seen the concepts of Steam, Rock, Poison, Ender, Desiccant, and the Dragon of Love. I borrowed all these pictures from the developer's Discord channel. This publication was made on the 1st of April, 2000 of the 18th year, and after posting them, he wrote a note that they were all just a product of his insomnia, and in general, they were created more for the sake of banter on April Fool's Day. So those of you who still think for some reason that this is a real concept, now know that these dragons are not declared, and it's not worth waiting for them, although who knows. As for me, it's poisonous very well. Maybe someday it's a joke, and it will turn into a real mob. I have come across a lot of floating questions about the third phase. This apparently refers to the 15th version of the main, but the creators of the fashion on this topic are still silent, which is understandable. The 15th version is about to be followed by the 16th, so it is still unknown what it makes sense to spend your time and energy on. Therefore, calm down. There is no need to run ahead of the locomotive. Let's calmly wait for the beginning of the second phase. And since you do not get tired of asking me questions when, especially for you, I was not lazy and looked for developers that they comment on the timing. In the Discord channel in the FAQ, the main developer answered as follows. It would be better if you didn't ask when, because developers don't like being under pressure. As soon as it is ready, we will release it. However, on their wiki in discussions, there was such an assumption that they plan to show us the Queen of Horrors already this month, in February of the 2020th year. Storm Dragon can be expected in April, Indigo and Vampires in May, and Frith in July, Kraken and Werewolves in September, Ghosts in October, Goblins and Automatons in December. Who exactly is the commentator and what he has to do with the development of the mod, I could not find out. In the Discord channel, the order of exit of creatures is stated to be somewhat different. The first are the Army of Horror and their boss, then the Storm Dragon, then the Hydra, then the Wendigo, then the Werewolf Vampires, after them the Automoons, Ghosts, Goblins, Kraken, and finally Frith, aka the Fire Boss. Well, now let's go directly to the creatures and what they are. Let's start with the Queen of Horrors, as the closest and most long-awaited update. Here's what a screenshot with the concept of this mob looks like. He reminds me painfully of the King of the Night from Game of Thrones, and without a doubt, this series was the inspiration for the creation of such a boss. The resemblance to the face. There are blue frosty eyes and a scepter, very similar to the legendary spear from the 7th season, which struck the dragon, and of course, the dragon himself, who apparently will be the mount and pat of the Queen of Horrors. The dragon, by the way, has its own name, Black Frost or Black Frost. Here is his concept, and in my opinion, he is just great. By the way, for fans of the Game of Thrones series, There is also a resource pack from the developers of the mod, with textures in the appropriate style. Links to the official resource packs developers can get directly from their channel in the Discord. Well, I will leave a link to their channel, as well as all other links to developer resources, in the description under the video. The Queen of Terror will be accompanied by her army, consisting of powerful necromancers, individuals capable of raising the dead. The lychees will be guarded by Knights of Terror, infantry and mounted on such beautiful skeletal horses. During the march, the lychees raise various creatures from the dead, which they make their minions and force them to serve the queen. Among these creatures are ghouls, slaves, beasts and scuttlers, or maybe it's better to call them runners. To be a little more specific, ghouls are humanoid monsters that devour everyone in their path. Slaves or trolls are skeletons called up to serve the queen and are not afraid of sunlight. Beasts are animals killed by lich, turned into something like hellhounds. Well, scuttlers or runners are creepy anomalous creatures created from various dead arthropods. In general, the company of the new boss of the Queen of Horror is going to be fun. By the way, initially the developers had the idea to create a King of Horror, but they abandoned it. So there will be no king. The Queen herself personally seems to me to be a kind of mixture of Dinery from the Stormborn and the King of the Night. And here's what it says about her in the preview. No one knows where the Queen of Terror came from or how she lost her power. The only echoes of its existence are abandoned necropolises, which are located in the coldest parts of this world. Images of the Queen and the skeleton dragon beside her have been preserved on their walls. On the wiki of the Ice and Flame mod, there is information that the Queen of Horror will not spawn naturally in the ordinary world, but will be in her own dimension, which can be accessed through a portal. Well, let's move on. Storm Dragon, an unreal, fantastic, almost ghostly dragon that flies at night during a thunderstorm among lightning and thundering skies. He pours his enemies with jets of electric discharges. At the moment, he has 4 known colors: blue, lilac, gray, and dark brown. Perhaps it will be available for taming, most likely by hatching from an egg. Males will have a pattern similar to lightning on their wings. Females have slightly curved horns. As for crossing, the developers are still thinking about which lilies to use to stimulate egg laying. Fiery, icy, or perhaps both. Hydra, a very poisonous multi-headed reptile capable of growing back its severed heads. She crawls among the mangrove-like roots of Lerna trees. Even her very breath is poisonous, not to mention that every bite of this creature is a real curse for someone who was not ready to meet her. The only effective means of combating Hydra will be fire, as we can see in the pictures. First it is shown with 4 heads, then one of these 4 heads is cut off, and already in the next picture, the Hydra has 5 heads. In other words, it can be assumed that she does not just grow her heads back, but also multiplies them, as it was with the Hydra from Greek mythology. The Lerna forest is mentioned here, so the analogy is obvious. And since the trees are mentioned, it means that Hydra will be given to us along with those very Lerna trees that look like mangroves. But here's what a location with a Hydra will look like. We can only fantasize. Will it be a separate location, like a dance with a gorgon, or are the developers going to add a whole biome? And this is still a mystery shrouded in darkness. The Wendigo is a voracious forest creature that disguises itself as harmless animals, after which it attacks an unsuspecting victim. No one knows if Wendigo is a demon or a human being cursed for eating his own kind. You can identify him only by his glowing eyes. This creature will live in the taiga forests, and its true form is a terrible beast with fangs, claws, and horns. Vampires, nighttime blood-sucking monsters, that were once human. They hunt for blood, both human and animal. Some of them have gone completely wild and live in caves, where they lie in wait for accidentally strayed prey. The fact that they were once ordinary people is indicated only by the rags left over from their former clothes. Other vampires live in a more civilized way. They build majestic castles and live there, enjoying their bloody feasts. Having met with such creatures, make sure that you have put enough garlic on yourself, so as not to let them get close to you. Otherwise, you may suddenly find that you suddenly feel uncomfortable being in the sun. From this description, we can assume that vampires will be added to us with dungeons in the form of castles, and in addition, the garlic plant will be added. How they will be combined with the vampirism mod is still difficult to guess, but I think that Asafara vampires will not have such complex pumping mechanics, so there should be no conflicts. Werewolves, the unfortunate ones who are unlucky and are cursed to turn into wolf-like beasts as soon as the full moon rises in the sky. On full moons, wall up all windows and doors, especially if you hear a chilling howl. Werewolf claws are capable of tearing flesh and tearing through armor, but the worst thing is the bite of a werewolf. The bite will turn you into the same creature, and you will start throwing yourself at everyone who turns up. There is only one cure death from a silver weapon. Apparently, silver is assigned a more significant role in the future than it is today. But again, it's hard to say how advanced werewolf will be in terms of leveling skills. Let's live. We'll see. Automatons are ancient dilapidated mechanisms that wake up when some intelligent being is nearby. Then, these machines rise up to destroy. They come in different forms. Seekers similar to Greek hoplites, who cut down enemies with their swords, or mini-cannons on gear wheels, shooting arrows. Sometimes they are locked in clock towers, and sometimes they rot somewhere, abandoned in the world. But every machine has a creator. And the creators of automatons, sick maniacs, obsessed only with the idea of improving their destruction devices. All of their machines are autonomous, but the creators themselves climb into mechanical armor, equipped with a giant axe and a cannon. You can defeat them only by disarming and pulling them out of their armor. Ghosts are vengeful spirits that arise in place of their former bodies and attack everyone who happens to be nearby indiscriminately. This is what is written in the Privyushka. When someone is killed and his body is desecrated, his soul rises in rage and a sense of revenge where he was once alive. What remains of her is a ghost, a creature so full of hatred that it will try to capture the souls of everyone who sets foot on its territory, regardless of whether they are guilty of his death or not. Goblins, greedy devils who raid nearby villages and steal valuables there to store them in their forts. Goblins come in two variants, forest and cave. They will also have several tribes that are at war with each other. That is, goblins will fight not only mountain with forest, but also tribes among themselves. Tribes, by the way, differ in the color of their clothes. In battle, they will use a whole range of different weapons and protective equipment, as well as various allies, such as wolves, spiders, trolls, and even creepers. And besides, they will be able to use poison and dynamite. The leader of the forest goblins is the leader, but the cave goblins will have a king. So, the implication is that cave goblins are a more civilized goblin race. They live in underground forts, and they have the ability to make guns and various equipment, and quite advanced, such as forged iron, and they can also produce gunpowder. In battle, the canals use tinty, poisons. They are supported by mountain trolls, and their cavalry consists of spider riders. As we can see in the photo, in addition to the usual ordinary goblins, they have a king with a crown on his head, as well as such a large hobgoblin with a falchion. The forest relatives of goblins are much more primitive. They have no iron. They live in tribes and villages. Their equipment is simple, but they also use poison, trolls as allies, although in this case forest, and their cavalry consists of wolf riders. They don't have explosives as such, but they use creepers. On the preview, we again see two outstanding mobs. This is a leader and a shaman. It is written about the shaman that he will wield potions. Kraken, planned as a boss. This is a huge sea creature that rises from the depths to bring panic, terror, and death to creatures on the surface. No ship is able to escape from its terrible tentacles. Its length is approximately 30 blocks. What kind of ships are we talking about? I did not understand, because at the moment there are no ships in fashion. Perhaps they mean boats, but on the other hand, boats are easily destroyed by sea snakes. Do you think it could be that the developers, together with the Kraken, will give us ships as well? Personally, I would really like that. An Ifrit, aka the Fire Boss, a creature from the depths of hell, with a flaming sword in his hands. He owns the original ring, created from lava and fire, and able to fulfill any, even the most insane desires. You can try to enter hell and take away this very ring by killing the Fire Boss. I don't know about you, but personally I see in this mob a reference to the Lord of the Rings. That's all the creatures that the developers have announced to us today. I hope I was able to answer most of your questions related to the updates of the Ice and Flame mod. By the way, write in the comments, which creature are you waiting for the most? Personally, I was interested in Wendigo. I really want to see how he will disguise himself. Although, in fact, it is difficult to make a choice, since all the declared creatures are interesting, each in its own way. Put your fingers up if you liked this video, subscribe to my channel, and that's it for today. Bye bye.